Hey, we're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here looking at life through a biblical lens. Only now we're going to look a little bit into the future. I want to start a series dissecting the book of the Revelation, looking at the future, looking at this invisible war that has been circulating as long as there have been human beings on this planet. Tonight we're going to look at who are the players. Because we know life does not happen in a vacuum, and that the simplest things in God's economy happen for a reason. So when considering the God who is eternal, we dare not be surprised that he is working from an eternal list of goals. The Bible chronicles the events of God and man over a 4,000-year span, at least. And then he projects out at least another 2,000 years plus to show us how it's all going to end. Starting with Adam and Eve working through their children and their children's children, we are very quickly brought up through 2,000 years of human history to the flood. Why destroy all human life on the planet? Because men were indiscriminate as to who they would marry. Because men were dominating other men. The word in the Bible, giants, probably refers to people of greater size, but more likely greater power. It is the wickedness of man, the Bible says in Genesis 6, verse 5 and 6, that moved God. The Old English word repented is used, referencing God's grief at what he saw. It repented God. But God never actually repents in the sense that we do. God looked at it and said, that's causing a problem. We don't want that. But the God of the Bible knew ahead of time it would be that way. It was all part of the program. The new start that was given to these players, to Noah and his children, didn't seem to change much as the descendants of Noah created their own religion. We read about it in Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. They were seeking to reach into the heavens, which made that tower a religious structure. The ancient descriptions of what they believed and what they were doing points to a counterfeit and competitive religious expression that has survived to this day. In confounding the language, God succeeded in stopping this work. However, as the people spread throughout the world, they took their religion with them. And everywhere we look, you can see the seeds of Babel. In almost every culture, an anti-Christian religion, we can see Babel. After diffusing this heretical expression, God singled out one man, Abram, to carry on God's work. When we see him, he's living in the shadow of Babel, in what we know today as Iraq, near the Persian Gulf. He's 75 years of age, and he has no offspring. God tells him to leave the country of his birth. And he does so, taking his only living relative, a nephew by the name of Lot. And he moves to the area just south of Jerusalem, a place called Canaan. Upon his arrival, God appears to him again, confirming that this is where he wants Abram to be. It is the land of Canaan. Genesis chapter 12 says the Canaanite was then in the land. The narrative shows Abram moving his family and flocks to Egypt to avoid a famine, bringing back a servant woman by the name of Hagar, by whom he would eventually have a son. He would name him Ishmael. Abram's wife Sarah insisting that Abram might have an heir, she being 65 years of age and barren. So now the table is set. Abram is a wealthy sheep herder, and he has an heir. He had had a trusted servant who would inherit his property when he dies to ensure his legacy would continue. But now he has Ishmael. Because of God's prospering, Abram tells his nephew Lot to move his family and flocks somewhere else. Wasn't enough room where they were. And he gives Lot his choice. You can have anything you want. And Lot chooses the area south of where Abram was, where the grass was green, the water plentiful. Bible says it was near the 5 cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah being the 2 we hear most about. Now, skeptics point to the fact that this area is semi-arid. It's almost desert. It's not at all how the Bible describes it. But they weren't there in Abram's day. In Abram's day, it was lush. With the destruction of the cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah being 2 of them, there was a rain of fire that descended. And what we see in that area now is the result of that. Lot probably saw that area as they were coming back from Egypt. You know, they'd gone down to Egypt, he got the handmaid, and they came back. He passed through that twice. And so now we have Lot down near Sodom and Gomorrah. Abram a little bit further north. In time, 4 northern kings would invade the cities of the plain and take captives. Among them would be Lot and his family. And Abram puts together his own little army from among his servants, and he goes after them. Capturing this rear element of those armies, Abram was able to defeat them and to take back all that was captured of all that they took. It's worth noting that in this scenario, Jerusalem as a city already existed. It was under the leadership of one Melchizedek, referred to as the King of Salem, also referred to as a priest of the Most High God, Jehovah. Genesis chapter 14. When Abram returns from the battle from which he retrieved Lot and his family after the destruction of those cities of the plain, he goes by Jerusalem. He stops there. And here was a priest of the Most High. And Abram makes a point of giving him an offering. Beginning in verse 19, Melchizedek blesses Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." And he, Abram, gave him, Melchizedek, tithes of all that he had taken, which Melchizedek refused to receive. So in verse 23, Abram is heard declaring how that he would not take anything from Melchizedek, lest it be said that he, Melchizedek, or he, Abram, I should say, had made Melchizedek rich. It wouldn't be long before Lot was a leader in Sodom, having moved into that city. So when God purposed to destroy the 5 corrupt cities of the plain, angels had to drag him and his family out of that city. And after all this, God then speaks to Abram in a vision. In chapter 15, he says, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." And this is where Abram cuts up a heifer and lays the meat out and watches it for several days, keeping the birds away. And as the sun was setting, a deep sleep came upon Abram, and the horrors of darkness fell upon him, and God spoke to him. Abram's seed would be a stranger in the land that is not theirs. Abram's seed would be afflicted for 400 years. But afterward, God would judge that nation, and Abram's children would leave there wealthy. He's talking about Egypt. After all this, God moves amidst this sacrifice. Verse 17 says, "Behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces," no doubt consuming them. And he makes a covenant with Abram, saying, "Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt," we call it the Red Sea, "to the Euphrates, shall be unto thy seed." The names given are the people groups that lived there, all of them ites, meaning they were all forms of Canaanites, descendants of Ham through his son Canaan, and all of them were wicked people. This means that God has given to Abraham all the land from Syria all the way down to Egypt, and a goodly amount of Jordan and Saudi Arabia to boot. One day, they'll have it all. The stage is now set. What will one day be called the nation of Israel, after Abraham's grandson Jacob, whom God renamed Israel, this fledgling nation of Israel is about to endure a terrific purging. They will learn many valuable lessons. They will be corrupted by their Egyptian bondage for 400 years. And those who had spent time there as adults will die in the wilderness over a 40-year period. Only those who did not know Egypt will be permitted to enter into this promised land. As Israel left Egypt, God cut covenant with them at Sinai. And this is called the Mosaic covenant. Exodus chapter 19. And God said, "Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine." Did you hear it? This is a conditional covenant. They have to do something. "And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." Now the rest of the Bible revolves around this promise, because the nation is eventually established. David is the nation's crowning glory. Solomon, his son, builds the temple. But from there, the nation drifts downward into sin and ultimate destruction. The Babylonians capture the city in 587 BC. The important people are killed. The promising people are taken captive. And everyone else is left there to fend for themselves. And from this comes Daniel, who would speak for God over the next 50 years. And what God shows him is nothing short of amazing, startling, shocking. But it is also promising. And what the world has done since is working out just as God said it would. That all of human history would ultimately revolve around the nation of Israel. That Israel would suffer a tremendous abandonment until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. That Israel would then be reestablished in the land, a nation of the world again. And that the whole world would revolve around her and around the covenant God made with Abram thousands of years earlier. This month, Israel will be celebrating 70 years back in the land of promise. The nations of the world will come to rejoice with her. Those who will not are the physical and religious descendants of the Canaanites. You see, Islam is largely Canaanite. African people are descendants of Ham, who is the father of Canaan. Communist countries are anti-Christian, therefore anti-Israel. Only the Western nations have a natural affinity for Israel, and that because they serve the same God. Oh, in name only, for the most part. But it is our heritage as Christian people. The biblical doctrines of Christianity lean heavily upon what God has said and done, what God has promised to do in and through Israel. The first Christians were Jews. The first missionaries were Jews. The best friends Israel has ever had in the world have been Christians. And those who persecute Israel have always been God haters, no matter what else they may have called themselves. In belief, they didn't love God. The looming question in all of this is why? And that will be the discussion in the next episode of The Invisible War. Stay tuned.